Good afternoon to all professionals. A very warm welcome to the webinar. My name is CA Ashutosh Agarwal. Today we have our guest faculty, CA Ganesh Balakrishnan sir, with us. Ganesh sir is CA, CPA, CWA with over 28 years of professional experience in corporates and is partner at Deloitte Hyderabad. He is very popular speaker at various CA platforms and medias. We have CA Vivek Khurana sir also, who is founder of CA Sansaar and very renowned name in CA fraternity. Our today's topic of webinar is peer review and driving the new way of doing audit. So now I request Vivek sir for welcome address.
Thank you, Ashutosh. So, a warm welcome to all of you on this today's webinar. And first of all, my sincere thanks and welcome to our very learned, very respected CA Ganesh ji. Sir, thank you very much
Namaskar.
for giving us your valuable time. I know you have very busy schedule. You have some international assignment and international calls after this webinar. But thanks to you. And I think everybody is fit and fine because it's very crucial time is going on. And recently we did bank audits in this COVID-19, and I can say that we professional, we chartered accountant, also warriors for the Indian economy. And now it's time for this one companies audit, company stat audit, and other stat audits. So we want to know how we can do this in this COVID-19 scenario. So Ganesh sir is with us. He will guide us first regarding the peer review. This very important topic, peer review, and another one is driving the new way of audit under this COVID environment. So without wasting any time, now it's over to you, Ganesh ji. Sir, please.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon to the chairman and to Ashutosh. Fine, if you're able to get this so that you're able to see that screen. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right. So a very good afternoon. Thank you very much. And I hope everyone is safe. And I do understand when Ms. Khurana called me up and said, we need to do a peer review. Can you do it tomorrow? So the time that I had was about 2 hours. I said, I can do it. But I said, peer review people may not be interested so much as people would be interested to know how do you do an audit under the COVID environment. I thought we will do a combination of both peer review as well as the audit under COVID environment. And I say why this is important, why a peer review is very critical under a COVID environment also. As you are aware that peer review is basically done and many of the professionals and the practitioners seek this peer review certificate for those firms to carry out the audit of listed companies or banks and insurance companies, which are central auditors. So it's very important that a peer review a certificate is very important for all the professionals. But having said this peer review will also be covered under a COVID environment. And if you see this year, March 2020 will also be a year on which a peer review could be performed when you have challenges which is due to COVID, because there are restrictions to go to a client, to raise restrictions for you to go and observe a physical inventory. There are restrictions to seek information going and physically visiting the client premises. So I will touch upon the importance of the peer review and the essence why peer review is also very important. What was the objective as to why a peer review was actually commissioned? Whilst many would say, we have got our peer review certificate, we have got everything done. But if you see the peer review, the way it has evolved from 2002 till now, and we are almost talking about 18 years now, it has just only evolved. But there are challenges that have come through because of various non-compliances, including from the QRB, the Quality Review Board, and then recently now constituted the NEFRA, which is the National Financial Reporting Authority. Now, given these two bodies being there, which has actually performed reviews on the CA firms, one of the key issues that has come up, especially from majority of the review, and if you see the QRB report that has come through, basically the non-compliance relating to standards on quality control one. And if you see the peer review also focuses significantly on the standards on quality control one. So therefore, I will touch upon the importance of these standards on quality control one as a part of the peer review. I'll also touch upon the importance as to what are the responsibility of the practice unit. The CA firms are called as the practice units, and the people who come and do peer review are called the reviewers. So I'll touch upon both the responsibility of the practice units as well as the reviewers who conduct peer review on the CA firms. Again, peer reviewed so far have been my ask to the peer review board and the chairman, and every time I talk to him is to make sure the peer review process is an independent process that is followed by the peer review board and the fees are paid by the peer review board. However, the peer review board continues to give uh, the authority or the responsibility or the choice to the practice unit to select the peer reviewers and also pay them. So I think this is where the objective of having a peer review being more robust, making sure that it is in compliance, has actually to some extent got diluted. And I'll touch upon why that is very, very important. There are extension of validity which has been given by the peer review board, especially during the COVID environment, because many of the practice units or many of the peer reviews were not in a position to carry out the peer review, and therefore they have sought an extension, and rightly so, the peer review board has provided an extension. I'll touch upon that. I'll also touch upon the present peer review system in India. What are the duties of the board? Which are the member firms which are subjected to peer review? I'll talk about the obligations of the practice unit. I'll talk about the peer review questionnaire. I'll talk about the value addition that is expected from the peer review process. I'll also talk about the advisories which are given by the peer review board to the peer reviewers and the time schedule. Very critical. Peer review as it stands is not an investigative process. It is not a fault finding process. I think the whole objective of a peer review, why it was commissioned, was predominantly to assist a firm to improve its quality review process. However, if you find that majority of the times there has been disputes between the practice units and the peer reviewers, and that's where it got somewhere lost the relevance. So I think we need to come back the distinction between a peer review process, which is only to strengthen the practice unit or those professionals who are practicing to carry out the statutory audit. It is to strengthen them. It is not in any way to pull them down and make sure that they are lower than compared to the other professionals. The objective, that is the reason why it was commissioned. And if you were to see the peer review itself, the definition, it's someone who is of a similar standing. That means a chartered accountant who has already been in practice is a person who will come and review. And what for? It basically means that he'll do a review of the work done by the professionals who have got a similar standing. And that's the whole process of a peer review. And what does he look at? Basically looks at the quality of the attestation. Then what is the quality that has gone through when you're issuing an audit report? Whether the entity or the reviews or the practice units have actually complied with the technical standards, have complied with the accounting standards, have they complied with auditing standards, have they complied with independence, have they complied with quality control standards. These are some of the things which are generally looked through a peer review process. And this is basically constituted by a board called the peer review board. This was formed in the year 2002. And if you see basically from 2002 to 2010, it's only when the SEBI started insisting on for any auditor to be for any of the CA firm to be an auditor of a listed company, need to submit a peer review certificate. And it got prominence only from the year 2010. Between 2002 and 2010, it was more like something like a firm used to get it reviewed. Only when something becomes mandatory, it's that point in time when the CA firm starts looking at to get their firm reviewed under the peer review board. and get the peer review certificate. Usually the peer review certificate is valid for a period of 3 years. Again, depending upon the number of years that the CA firm is in, accordingly it will be done. Now, the objective, as I said, is only to maintain enhanced quality. This is only to improve the performance of practice units. Now, if you take this objective, there is a senior person who has got a similar standing, who has got a knowledge, comes back and recommends saying that you need to comply with A, B, and C. You have not complied with SCUC. You have complied with the, you need to have work more on working documentation. This is nothing but to improve the performance of the practice unit. And that is where you would see many of the practice units, if you volunteer yourself to the peer review board and say, we want the firm to be peer reviewed because we want to enhance our quality of performance, I think probably the objective of the peer review board would be achieved. Otherwise, it becomes a challenge. As I mentioned, peer review is mandatory only for listed companies or for central statutory auditors. There are levels on which each of the firms needs to get peer reviewed, whether it's a level 1, level 2, and level 3. I'll talk about that. Peer review basically today is only talks about attestation services. What does it include? Auditing, verification of financial transactions, accounts, preparation and certification of financial accounting. All of these are covered. Tax audits are covered. Now, somebody was asking in one of the other time, why is GST not included? I think going forward, GST also would be included and subjected to peer review. I think these are some of the things which are very, very critical. If you are a firm of standing which carries out attestation service, basically an audit or a certification, those firms will need to be subjected to peer review. Now, if you need to carry out an audit of any listed company, it is mandatory under the listing agreement to have the peer review, valid peer review certificate. Before the appointment, the board of directors or those charged with governance, the audit committee, will need to seek the information whether your firm is subjected to any peer review, and please provide us a copy of the peer review certificate. Now, what are the technical standards that are included? It includes accounting standards issued by ICAI, by MCA, by RBI, by any standards that have been issued. The standards on auditing issued by AASB, MCA, NFRA, all of these which are covered under the Companies Act. Any guidance is issued by ICAI, any directions which have been issued by the ICAI, any of the regulations or directions issued by MCA, by SEBI, by RBI, by IRDA, by any of these agencies, whichever issues for the purpose of statutory audit, those relevant statutes will be reviewed when a practice unit is selected for a peer review. What is the scope of a peer review? A scope of a peer review typically is for a period of 3 years. So for a 3 completed financial years is what a peer review would be selected. Somebody might ask, why don't you do it every year? I think the process is, it takes time, and it is very appropriate to have done once in 3 years so that the peer review certificate is issued for a period of 3 years. What should the review focus? As I mentioned to you, it's the technical standards, it's the quality of reporting, it's the office systems and procedures in respect to compliance to attestation services. Most important, it's the training programs for staff. Training programs is not, the training program means that what you've attended in a CPE sector. For example, right now you're doing an unstructured CPE learning. That is not what is a training program. A training program needs to be divided between an internal training program and an external training program. An internal training program is different for each of the practice units. Suppose if I have a firm which has got branches across all over the country, I've got branches across the globe, my way of doing training is different from those which have only proprietary, which has only limited number of people. So therefore, all of these systems, procedures relating to training has to be looked at it, both in terms of the firm's policies and procedures, and also external in terms of the technical standards and compliance to various laws. So therefore, it is important that a training is not the training program which is conducted by ICAI alone. The training program includes both internal as well as the external. So therefore, this becomes very, very essential. Objectives, it is a repetitive, it again talks about technical standards, making sure there is a proper systems, making sure there are no non-compliance to quality control standards. These are some of the things which are very, very essential. Now, one of the key things and a decision taken by the peer review board is in respect of the extension of the validity of the peer review certificate. What did they say? Because there has been a lockdown, it is not practically possible for the peer reviewer to go and get it peer reviewed, nor it is practically possible because of the lockdown for the practice unit to apply and get that reviewed. And therefore, any firm which held a peer review certificate which expired between the period April 1st and March 24th was given an extension until 2021. So therefore, for one more year, that report is valid. That means whatever was the report that was valid in the previous period, especially for the period between 2014 and 17, because we are talking about for 3 years. So therefore, it becomes essential that those firms which held, which was for which this certificate got expired during this period, can hold and can utilize the same certificate issued in the earlier period, which was valid until 2020. So therefore, this was one extension which was given, provided there were no observations which was in respect of the earlier certificate. So therefore, it becomes very, very essential. That means there should not be any observation in the earlier valid certificate which was issued to the peer reviewer. Now, what was a global scenario? Again, there is a distinction between a global scenario which was in India and the global scenario which is the scenario in India and the global scenario. Global scenario, the objective which was again formed in 1930s was to enhance the quality performance of the practice unit. At the same time, involve the disciplinary proceedings against that practice unit which has not complied. This is a significant distinction between the peer review in India and the peer review abroad in global. That means disciplinary proceedings are not taken, actions are taken against the practice unit. At best, the practice unit do not get a peer review certificate. However, if the peer reviewer thinks that company has not complied, as has been in violation of any of the regulations of the ICAI or any of the MCA, then they can report to the ICAI peer review board. Peer review board, based on its decision about the quality, can or may take an action against the practice unit or can refer to disciplinary proceedings. However, till date, I do not see any such instances which has been carried out for those practice units which have not complied with. However, given NEFRA which has come through, and I think this is very, very essential. And if you see NEFRA, the way they have brought in, it not only covers the listed entities, it also covers those unlisted entities, which is a threshold about 500 crores. So therefore, it is essential, irrespective of whether your firm has been subjected to peer review or not, whether an action has been taken by the peer review board on the practice unit or not, it is important that given the new scenario arising out of NEFRA, it is very, very essential for the practice units which are carrying out audit of listed entities or those which are meeting the threshold to comply with all reporting standards, all requirements and the auditing guidances, or everything should be complied with. Now, peer reviewers are basically, who are the reviewers? Again, these reviewers are nothing but those people who have got a standing, who are the chartered accountants who are registered with the ICAI. Now, what are the duties of the peer review board? They can call for information and records from the practice units. They can suo motu do that. They don't have to wait for the practice unit to apply. They can suo motu do it. They can arrange and organize for training or orientation program for the reviewers and the practice unit. They can prescribe procedures to the practice units or to the peer review. They also have the authority and responsibility to maintain a panel of reviewers. There have been at most requests received from the peer review board asking for many of the practicing chartered accountants to nominate themselves as peer reviewers. I think this is another area where the peer review chairman has been insisting, saying that we are short of the peer reviewers. We need more peer reviewers. However, given whatever the information that the panels which are existing right now with the peer review board, there is still the option that is given to the practice unit to select. So therefore, even if you choose to be a peer reviewer, it may have a situation where you may not be selected because the practice unit may not want you. So I think there is this gap, but still there is a dearth for the peer reviewers. And I think we encourage many of the practice units to nominate themselves or empanel themselves with a peer review board. Now, there are formats that has been prescribed, they're getting updated. You can always go to ICAI.org. Under that, you have the peer review. The peer review board has updated various manuals, various notifications as to how the peer review is done. Now, which are the firms which are subjected to review? Again, it's very essential. There are two levels. I would say there are three levels, but of which the two levels are very, very critical. At this point in time, the focus by the peer review board has been only at level 1. Again, because many of the companies, many of the practice units are auditing listed companies, and therefore it is mandatory because prescribed by the SEBI, then the practice units voluntarily themselves go to the peer review board and says, please have the peer review done so that we get the peer review certificate. Again, my recommendation to all the practicing chartered accountants, all the practice units, is that if your peer review certificate is getting expired, let's say during the month of March 2020, please do not wait till March 2020 and then write to the peer review board to commission a peer review. Instead, the whole peer review process has to be done within a period of 4 months. Assuming there are delays or something like that, make sure you plan at least by August of 2019 or September of 2019 to get the peer review done by March 2020. I think this is only an instance that I'm providing. Somebody might ask, already it has passed by, what is that irrelevance? I'm only giving you as an illustration that if your peer review certificates got expired in March 20, make sure that as a practice unit, you voluntarily go to the peer review board, write to the peer review board, state that you want the firm to be subjected to peer review, and therefore this is what is required. And especially for practice units which are handling larger listed companies, this becomes very, very essential because you need to place to the various companies, audit committees, or the board when they are appointing you as the statutory auditors of that entity. Now, which are the ones? Basically, level 1 includes central statutory auditors of the public sector banks or private sector banks or foreign banks or public financial institutions. It includes public sector undertakings, basically your C&AGs, the central statutory auditors of insurance companies, or those equity or debt listed in India or abroad, or any donations or contribution more than 50 crores, or funded by central or state government, or net worth which is more than 500 crores, or any of those where you carry out audit of the mutual fund schemes. All of these gets covered under level 1. So therefore, if your firm is involved in carrying out the audit of these which are listed under level 1, make sure that your practice unit is subjected to peer review, and the peer review, once it is completed, you hold a valid peer review certificate. There is also level 2. Now, if you look at level 2, not so much of focus has been given, not so much of focus both by the practice unit as well as by the peer review board. Basically, it talks about statutory audit of the following. What is it? Statutory internal concurrent systems tax audit or departmental review of branches, offices of public sector banks, private sector foreign banks, regional rural banks, NBFCs, net worth, which is about more than 50 crores. All of these gets covered. Now, right now, the focus by the peer review board has not been under level 2. Suppose you are auditing under this, and even now this has not been insisted by the Reserve Bank of India or by any other public financial institution or by any of the government undertakings. Even if you carry out, if this is what is looked at by those respective regulators, probably even your member firm which was not included, or the practice unit which was not included under level 2, may require you to get a peer review done. Now, what does it mean? There's a distinction in level 1 and level 2. Level 1 is for a period of 3 years. Level 2 is for a period of 4 years. Level 4, the focus is not much. Even for level 3, which is not covered under level 1 or level 2, is covered under level 3. So the level 3 is right now, as much as only level 1 is covered, level 2 is not covered, and level 3 definitely is not even in the picture. But in the interest of all the practice units which are carrying out audit of listed companies or intend to audit, become the central statutory auditors of a banks or a foreign bank or a financial institutions, make sure you hold a valid peer review certificate. Now, the need for a peer review, as I said, it's only to enhance the quality of service. I think that's the sole objective. It's also an affirmative, also to confirm that all the firms that are subjected are complying with the ICAI guidelines, are complying with the MCA guidelines, are complying with the Companies Act, are we complying with RBI, complying with uh, IRDA guidelines, are complying with various other guidelines issued by even the utilities companies. What is the process? As much as selection is level 1, level 2, and level 3, even the process is stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. The moment you empanel, you come first, you have an empanel. The peer review board has an empanelment form which you can go ahead, and if you have got the experience, then you can empanel. Once you empaneled, either voluntarily the practice unit because they need to have a certificate, or the peer review board can then by themselves identify which are the firms which will be subject to peer review. So they might identify, so therefore it becomes a selection. So the moment you select, then you send the intimation to the practice unit. The time clock starts from there. That's where you start the planning. Once the planning happens, once you identify who's a peer reviewer, who will come to do a peer review, there is a list which is given. Of the list of 3, you can identify somebody whom you think you're comfortable with at this point in time. But I would say identify somebody who can do value add, not somebody with whom you are comfortable with. There is a distinction, because somebody with whom you are comfortable with might come back and not give you something which will help you to enhance the quality of your own firm. Someone who's of a standing whom you think is tough, if you bring him as a peer review, probably he can educate you, he can guide you and enhance the quality of the documentation or the quality and manner in which you should carry out the audit. So therefore, it depends on the practice unit. How do they want it? Is peer review certificate a tick in a box, or peer review is a matter where you enhance the quality of your own firm when it comes to either delivery of an audit or reporting on that audit. So therefore, it is very, very essential. There are 3 stages that goes for a peer review. Stage 1, which involves planning. Stage 2, where the peer review comes to the practice unit. That's where the execution happens. Stage 3 is where once the peer review completes, it becomes a reporting. So stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. As I mentioned to you, there is some refinement that is happening in the peer review board. At this point in time, if you have got a 10 years of experience and you're practicing as a chartered accountant and you're practicing in various aspects of it, you can empanel with the peer review board. But suppose you want to do a peer review of a listed entity, then you need to have minimum of 15 years. You in practice, then you can empanel, then you can go and do a peer review of those entities which comes under the level 1 entity. Otherwise, you will be doing entities basically under the level 2 or level 3 entities. Very important, you cannot be someone who is working in industry, but someone who is actually having a practice. So only those people who are in practice can be involved to do a peer review. Now, selection again, either Sumoto or the peer review board can identify and select a firm, and then they can be subjected to peer review. As I mentioned to you, the peer review, once it is selected, the peer review is given a step option or a choice of reviewer from the list. So they might select from a list of 3. From the 3, you can look at which is the reviewer who can come and do a review. And a detailed questionnaire is shared with the practice unit. The practice unit needs to complete within 21 days and submit to the peer review board as well as the peer reviewer. Now, what is important? Now, is there a choice that is there with the practice unit to select which files to be conducted, or is it the peer review who's got the option to select? Here it is very important. It is only the peer reviewer who will identify from the list or the inventory of what is the work that you've carried out over a period of 3 years. It could be a statutory audit of a large company. It could be a tax audit of a small company or a large company. It could be a bank audits. It could be private limited companies. He can select anything. He can select at the head office. He can select something from the branch. He can do anything based on his selections, which he thinks he is comfortable to complete. Then he will send out the list of all of those files which he wants to review it. Now, the biggest challenge which the peer review faces, and this is always raised in every peer review discussion with the board, the saying is that the practice unit does not provide information on a timely basis, or the practice unit says that the person who has done the audit has left the organization, or the records you moved from one other office to the other office, and therefore you need more time. Now, just pause back. If you are complying to the standards on auditing, the most important standard of auditing under the auditing standards is standards on quality control 1, called SQC 1, which is mandatory from the year 2007 for all those firms which carry out audit of historical financial information or review of financial information or any attest services. So this is mandatory. And if you see the quality review board report also, you will find significant non-compliance only in auditing standards. There are non-compliance in accounting standards also, but majority of the observations comes through in SQC1. Now, having said this, it becomes important for every firm which is involved in the audit should comply with SQC1. The moment you comply with SQC1, trust me, everything will be compliant. And one of the requirements of the SQC1 is assembling of working papers within a period of 60 days from the date when you issue audit report. Now, if you're doing historically something between 2014 and 2017, now you're covering between 2017 and 2020, 60 days is lapsed already for 18, 19, and 20. Maybe 20 not, but 18 and 19. You cannot be saying that I don't have access to the files, the file was not there, the people were not there, and all of this. I think this becomes very, very essential. So therefore, the responsibility of the practice unit to say that he does not have, he's dependent on people, or the people not being there, or you do not have time to extract, or you're busy in somewhere, objective is lost the moment you use these matters when a peer reviewer comes. Because the requirement under the SQC says that you should have assembled the file. The moment you've done the audit, assemble the file, put it in a separate place where nobody can access it, or even if you access it, it is accessed with appropriate controls. Now, when that being the case, majority of the time you will find, and that's the reason why you have observations in the QRB, and it will not be this, it is no different even in a peer review, and that's where the challenge comes when it comes to peer review. So I think the responsibility of the peer reviewer as well as the practice unit to ensure that you have of these done. Once the samples are selected by the peer reviewer, you will give it in writing 2 weeks in advance that what are the records that is required. So therefore, you already have a period which is lapsed. You have 2 weeks, 15 days to select. Then you know which are the ones to be done. You have another 12 days. So we are talking almost in a month. You have time to even think about which are the files which will be produced for verifications. Once you have that selected, the peer reviewer should now make a visit to the practice unit. Now, what is the responsibility? The moment peer reviewer walks into your office, the important thing is those who maintain the responsibility, or the leadership responsibility, or those who are the senior partners, or those who are involved in the audit engagement are present and make a presentation to the peer reviewer about the firm, about the quality process, about the training process, about how the independence is maintained, how the monitoring is mechanized, how the audit quality controls are exercised on the audit engagement, how do you select people on the engagement, how do you conduct reviews, how do you conduct trainings, How do you help people to grow within your organization? These are something which are very, very essential when you deal with those when the peer review visits in your office. So therefore, it is important. Assemble, put all of these information in a PowerPoint. If it is not PowerPoint, make sure that you something you present through oral, saying this is what you've done, or prepare a document and press a Word document and present to the peer reviewer so that he understands the quality controls that are followed by the firm. He understands what are the procedures that was followed by the firm when carrying out an audit. It also understands what are the procedures that are followed for independence declarations or how the independence is monitored. He also understands how the acceptance and continuance of an audit engagement is done. He also understands how the monitoring and the improvements are done by the firm. I think this becomes a very, very essential. The moment you identify that your firm is being subjected to peer review, if you're forefront in being prepared and explaining to the peer reviewer, this is what you have done, this is how you've carried out, this is how the training is done, this is how you assemble the file, this is how you're done, then the comfort on the controls, the comfort on the overall condition of the systems followed by the firm, the confidence with which a peer review commences is much, much higher. The moment the peer review comes, he says, these are the files you carry out, you find it out and come back. And then you go back and say, these you could have asked, you could have discussed, we already is there, we have already, information is there. Because the time that is available to a peer review is limited to almost about 7 days. He has to complete the entire review within a period. While 1 month is lost in acceptance, everything, next 3 months is what he has to complete and issue a final report. So therefore, we are talking about a 90 days period plus a 30 days buffer period. About within 120 days, the whole peer review process should have been completed. Again, execution, I mentioned to you what is the initial meeting that has to be done. The peer reviewer can either visit the head office, can go and visit any of the branches. But again, my caution to the peer reviewers also is, please do not go and visit merely because you got an opportunity to visit a branch. If the practice unit can get all the records to the central head office, make sure all of the audits or reviews are done in the. In case that is not possible, if suppose someone from the branches, suppose somebody from some other offices can come to the head office of the practice unit, please accept all of that. Give it in writing what are the records you want to review, information which are the clients you want to review, so therefore it facilitates even for the practice unit. Other important thing which is very, very important, and this is something which should be followed based on ethical standards. Merely because you're going to a firm to conduct a peer review, please do not copy, please do not get details of that entity that you're subjecting and then solicit certain works from that entity in which you are carrying out a peer review of that practice unit. It is very essential, because many times there have been complaints saying that the practice unit has not carried out. The peer review took that information of which clients they have done. They contacted the client and said, they can provide you much more because they can value added. And the practice unit has lost the job. So I think these, from an ethical perspective, as much as I expect the practice unit to be upfront, be vocal in trying to provide the information, be upfront in providing the information. It is also the responsibility of the practice unit to prohibit or solicit any of the informations from the entity that you are reviewing or that files that you've selected to, which are subjected to peer review. Again, peer review is to help the practice unit to enhance the quality. So therefore, to the peer reviewers also, to make sure that you contribute to the learning, you contribute to the assistance of the practitioners to enhance their level of in doing audits. I think that will help the overall context of the audit carried out across India. The peer review should look at mandatorily at the 5 of the key controls. This is very, very mandatory, which I've been talking about. The independence, the maintenance of professional skills and standards, outside consultation, staff supervision and development, office administration. Now, again, office administration, one example that I've talked about was on the archival. Independence, I've talked about. Again, independence. Independence is not a declaration that you take every annually because a SQC requires you. Independence is that you will not deal with the client, you will not purchase in client, you will not maintain the personal wealth of the client. You are if you are doing an audit, you have to be independent of that. It is difficult for some small firms, some proprietor firms, some mid-sized firms, but as far as possible, make sure you're independent. I do understand in certain instances where the auditors are a part of the family man. If you're a part of the family man, that's where the independence issue comes up very, very difficult. And I think this is where you need to draw a line in between as to what is independence and what you declare as being independent. So this is very essential. The second part, which is generally done, is an outside consultations. For a convenience perspective, to meet an accounting objective of a client or to meet a result objective of a client, you might seek consultation from some CA firm and say, this CA firm has given me in writing. Let me tell you, there is no legal authority. There is no authority that is available for any CA firm to issue any guidances, because the only body which is involved to issue a guidance is the ICAI. You have the expert advisory committee, you can write to it. You might consult for a guidance, but you cannot take an accounting or an auditing writing consultation done. You might do an outside consultation for an actual evaluation. You might do valuation outside consultation for a valuation of an asset. Those are the competencies in which those respective practitioners are there. In accounting and auditing, as far as possible, avoid yourself from taking opinions from the same firm. So you generally typically have a tendency to take from other firm an advice and use that advice for the purpose of issuing an audit opinion. That is not accepted because it does not conform to the accounting and auditing standard issued by the ICAI, whether it is the AASP or the Accounting Standards Board or by the MCA or by NEFA. Now, once you identify attestation sample, once the peer review gets the reliance or the number of things, he can adopt two approach. He can say, okay, fine, I understood the controls and systems and policies. I can do a compliance approach, or alternatively, I can do a substantive approach. The approach followed by a peer reviewer is no different from the approach that you'll follow in terms of auditing an entity. Whether it's a controlled testings or a substantive testing, a similar approach is followed by a peer reviewer. Now, again, in this controls that he looks at it is the audit. When he talks about compliance approach, it looks at the audit record administration, which is basically your record keeping. Now, if you look at it, it is mandatorily required for every CA firm to keep records at least for a minimum of 7 years, to archive and assemble the file within a period of 60 days. These are required. How is the administration done in respect of these specific aspects? This is something which needs to be looked at. Next, he needs to look at the financial statement presentations. Schedule 3, ICAI guidelines, ICAI, any other information, RBI guidelines, IRDA guidelines, Electricity Board guidelines, any guidelines that are issued, whether the financial presentations are in accordance with those laws and statutes. Now, let me pause here. It's also important that a peer review cannot be doing a second guessing. It cannot say that, listen, you could have done provided more, you could have tested more, you could have done this, you could have done this. The peer reviewer can only say, if the standards on auditing have required you to do this, has the firm followed the procedures in letter and spirit? If the answer is yes, they have carried out. If they have not done, then you need to report as a peer reviewer. For the peer reviewer, the practice unit should equally be responsible to provide information and explanations that is required for the peer review to complete. So it includes how the internal control systems have been performed by the practice units, what are the substantive procedures performed, how is the audit conclusion involved, who are the people who are involved, has it been involved at the team level, has it been involved at the partners level, has it been involved at the leadership level, how is the audit report framed, are there any sufficient information that is available to give a clean opinion, or a modified opinion, or a qualified opinion, or an adverse, or a disclaimer opinion. All of these. For each of these, documentation is essential. SA 230 is very, very essential. So every practice unit should have documentation for all of these audits that you have carried out. Substantive effort approach is where where the practice unit specific controls are not looked at it. The peer review can do a substantive approach. That means he can go and look at each of the work papers. Stage 3, once the peer review has completed within a period of 7 days, he issues a preliminary report or an on-site review report. Now, what's the distinction between a quality review board and a peer review board? In a quality review board, the quality reviewer will issue even to the quality review board the preliminary report. Whereas in a peer review process, the peer reviewer only issues to or communicates the preliminary report only to the practice unit. And the practice unit is given 21 days from the date of receipt to respond to it. Now let's assume that 21 days has lapsed. Then the peer reviewer can again check with the practice unit. If no further response received, then he can issue what is called an interim report. An interim report will bring about what are the observations which the peer reviewer has noted, what he has looked at it. If he is not satisfied, report to the peer review board, and the peer review board can go back and submit, can come back to the practice unit and say, we will come back to you because your systems and procedures are not in compliance. You have not followed the procedures which is laid down by ICAI, and therefore we may be subjected after six months. Now, let's say even after that it is not done, after second time you still have certain observations, they can come back to you after a period of 12 months. Again, the responsibility lies with the practice unit to make sure they are in compliance with all the technical standards, with all the accounting standards, with all rules and regulations that are governing that. Now, the board can recommend wherever the weaknesses have been identified, help the practice units to give a period of 12 months or 1 year to make sure all of these corrections are carried out. Now, if these corrections are carried out, voluntarily the practice units can do it, or alternatively the peer review board can commission a peer review after the end of 12 months to see how the practice unit is performing. Again, if there are any deficiencies identified, a follow-up is looked at it by the peer reviewers. Now, once the final report, once the preliminary report is issued, once the comments are received from the practice unit, the peer review is satisfied to some extent or all the extent. If it does not have any observations, he gives a clean report. If he has got observations, then he identifies between those similarly to those what you issue in an audit report. If he wants to modify the report, he can modify the report. Based on the decision of the board, looking at the recommendations by the peer reviewer, this certificate can be issued by the board to the practice units. Again, what are the obligations? Now, this is very important. I've been stressing this. Obligation is both with the reviewers as well as with the practice unit. Provide any document or information that is required by the peer reviewer. This is very important. Number one. Two, always important that any explanation required, sit across and provide explanations. Three, make sure all assistance are done in connection with the peer review. If you cover all of these, then it is easier for the peer review to conduct. Similarly, peer reviewer should maintain confidentiality. He shall not use information that he has received during the peer review process and take that in records. No information, no work paper can be taken by the peer reviewer. He can only do what is called document his observation, his process, how he's followed, what it is. Again, there is a guidance or a formats that are prescribed under the peer review page of www.icai.org, which requires the working papers, which I'll talk about in the coming slides. The information that is given in the questionnaire and the information that is provided in the annexes as far as possible, the peer review should not contradict. Somewhere he cannot say that the company has maintained all records and say yes, and in his report says that the company is not maintained. So there cannot be contradictions, there cannot be ambiguity. It should be very important that all the important observations are noted, are discussed with the practice unit before it goes it. He shall not extract any of the practice unit's information. The peer review should adhere to the timings, should discuss the draft report with the practice unit, should finalize report, and should also bill. Now, one important thing, as much as the responsibility of the professional who is involved as a peer reviewer, it is also your responsibility as a practice unit to pay the fees to the peer reviewer merely because he has created a lot of problems. You don't withhold his payment. I think as a professional standards or professional ethics or a very good governance, you should honor the commitment of making the fees, because the fees that are described is about 15 lakhs to a maximum of a lakh. It's not big. I think it's important because this certificate alone will help you to get exposure or get access to do an audit of a listed company. Inherent limitations, very true, it was not going to bring in any changes which relates to effectiveness. It is the inherent limitation that there are limitations which are there. It's not a foolproof, it is not a certificate to the practice unit that they are compliant with all accounting and reporting standards. There is a complete questionnaires which should be reviewed. Peer review questionnaire which should be sent within 1 month, which talks about all of these. I'm not talking about it, but if you look at the division between part 1A talks about the profile of the practice unit, part B, which I've been specifically talking about, SQC1, which includes the leadership responsibility, ethical requirements, acceptance continuance, human resources, engagement performance, monitoring. My submission, my ask to all the practice units, all the professionals who are in practice, to make sure you adhere to the standards on quality control, one, which is very, very essential. Responsibility, I talked about it. You be the agent of change. Don't be the person to create problems for the practicing unit. I think that's the difference. If your mindset is to help others, the way you are helping somebody during a COVID situation, probably it is only enhancing and helping the person who have got weak to be more stronger. Other most important thing for the practice unit is what you have not documented is not work done. You cannot say that, sir, we have done, but we forgot to document. If you do not have documentation that demonstrates or that is evidenced by the peer reviewer, he can go ahead and comment saying that no work has been carried out, and that's where the dispute can keep coming. Peer review should identify the shortfalls in documentation, sit with the practice units and partners, impress upon the investment for proper documentation, tell them how it is important that where there are significant challenges, what is the remediations to be followed. It's always a value addition. As I said, you need to create value. And I think both for the practice unit as well as for the peer reviewers, you have to make sure that you are a value add to the practice unit, because the peer practice unit will learn from the experiences that you go through as a peer review by your recommendations, by your remediation process. There are benefits, and some of the practice units have really expressed it is not that it's always the peer review is a bad choice. Peer reviews have done a great job. They've got accolades from the practice units. I think it's both ways. You need to acknowledge both the practice units. The peer review should acknowledge if they've done a great job. The practice unit should acknowledge if the peer review has done a fantastic job. I think these are very, very important. Please expose all your staff, associates, to make sure that bring the importance of the standards on quality controls. You can ask the peer review to address the people to how to improve standards based on his experience. I think that'll be a great benefit for those people who are working with you. Standardization, preparation of audit programs, partners focus on development of clients, all of these becomes very, very essential. Advisories, there is a regular requirement that if you have to be a peer reviewer, you need to attend training programs. It is conducted very regularly. You see the peer review board almost conducts like in a quarter at least once. Please go and attend these training programs. Update yourself. Always, every peer review, you cannot sit back and say, I know everything. There is always changes that happens. Please update yourself. Look at the peer review manuals. Look at all of these. I think these are very, very essentials. Declaration, please do not make sure that you do not take people who do not work with you. Make sure you maintain confidentiality. You make sure that you maintain to all the guidelines that are issued by the peer review board, and you're not disqualified. Let me pause here. One of the key aspects of the peer reviewers is you can't say I have done the work, but I have not documented. Equally, a peer reviewer should document all the review findings in a work paper using the same principle of SA 230. He shall obtain the written representation from the practice unit using SA 580. He should agree to the terms of engagement using SA 210. He should continue to use SA 700, 701, 705 when he is issuing a peer review report. He should look at the only advantage, not 701, SA 700 and 705 and 706. The only distinction between a peer review report as well as any other audit report is that there is no UDI required to issue a peer review report. Peer reviewer should use his personal letterhead so that it contains all these numbers and all of this. The timings, it starts from day 1 and it goes up to day 90. This is something which is already there. I'm not getting to it, but it's essential that both the peer practice unit as well as the peer review exercise their responsibilities when they ensure get the peer reviews process completed, and so that they get the peer review certificate on a timely basis. Finally, if you look at it, the message from the peer review board and the peer review is we should build a constructive and honest community of chartered accountants, and this is very essential because if you want to maintain if you have to conserve the profession, if you want this profession to go for another 70 years, another 100 years, it is we as professionals should demonstrate the quality of the audit work that we carry out, the quality of the documentation that we maintain, and how do we represent as professionals to the outside. I think this is very, very essential. With this, I complete the stage 1, which is on the peer review. With your permission, Chairman, can I take the next topic and then come back to question and answers?
2-3 queries are there, sir.
So shall I come back once I complete this so that it is easier, or you want me to take it? Or you want me to take it?
It's a simple query.
Go ahead with the question, please.
Okay, the first query is from Raj Arora ji. Do you think a small CA firm should go for peer review?
I think never think yourself to be small. Think you want to be big. And if you think big, you will go for a peer review.
And one request I want to do that, don't pay anything. We are giving all the answers. Everything is free. Raji, don't pay any amount, please.
Okay, very nicely answered, sir. The second question is from Rupali Gupta ji. How to get work under peer review?
So the first important step is, please, if you meet the conditions, that means you should be in practice for at least for 10 years or 15 years, as the case may be. There is an empanelment form. Please fill in that empanelment. Which will ask you the question, experience, audits that you've handled, which types of audits you've handled, whether it's a bank audit, a company's audit, bank concurrent audit, cooperative audit, insurance audit, various things. Then give a self-declaration, give your details, give your profile of the firm, and file it with the peer review board. That once peer review board accepts you as an empanels you, that's the time that you are empaneled. Now, how do you get work from this? To get a work, it's again depends upon the selections, the number of firms that are coming up for practice unit. They might select and give the names to the practice units. There, the practice units can select any of the firms. If you're lucky, you will get it. If you're not lucky, you need to wait for a couple of months. I think it's important that as a professional, if the more and more you're visible in the CA fraternity, you can participate by making a presentation like this. You can talk about it. You can do any other help the CA students, anybody. Where there's an exposure, probably people will be aware of it. Where probably people will recognize what is the value that you're creating to the profession at large. At that point in time, there is every likelihood that you will be selected for a peer review.
Okay, sir. Let's move on.
Any other question? You said 3. I have answered 2. Any other question?
But just people are asking for PPT. No issue. We'll discuss
So
that later.
PPT, the moment once I've done, I will share the PPT.
No issue.
So you will get that about it.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
So
Yeah.
let me move to this next one, which is on the COVID-19, and this is the most critical part. Now, I don't know how many of you have really experienced this. I'm sure when you've done bank audits, you would have experienced this, and I'll tell you where you would have experienced it. We were under complete lockdown from the last week of March till about the first week of May. Some states allowed. Second week of May, some states allowed. Third week of May, some states allowed. The biggest thing that comes through in your mind: how did you carry out cutoff procedures? Now, to say that I've got a cash certificate, to say I've got a stocks inventory certificate, to say that I've got certificate from somebody else. Now, how did you get that? The couriers are stopped. There is no courier. There is no other ways that you could have got other than through a confirmation by an email. You are not tech savvy. How did you get? Did you go to the client? The client came and delivered to you? If the answer is yes, then you're not in compliance with SA 505, seeking confirmation, external confirmations. And therefore, this becomes very, very critical. The thought through, how did you do an audit? Somebody might say, sir, we were there as of March 23rd. You please take that record and say that you give the audit. I will give you a record on that day. Will you accept that? Are you auditing as of 23rd of March, or are you auditing as of March 31st? That's number one. Number two, what are you auditing? Are you auditing the audit of financial statements? Or also are you auditing the audit of internal control of financial statements? Now, while for the listed companies, it is mandatory, the operative effectiveness is required. For the unlisted companies, it is only that the internal financial controls are operating, not effectively, are in existence. There are systems of internal controls are in place. But for the auditor, the audit report should carry out the audit of internal control over financial reporting. Now, when that being the case, you are certifying as the controls existing on March 31st, 2020. You did not go to the client. The client was not open. You did not have information. How did you issue a report on controls over financial reporting? What are the controls that have changed between last week of March to 31st of March? Do you have information? We do not have information. Therefore, whatever audit that you have carried out till last year will not be the same basis of audit in the current period. This is very, very clear. Every area of work will be impacted. Now, let me talk about the first and foremost thing for an auditor is to know the industry in which he's auditing. Now, let's, for example, you've done a bank audit. So the RBI said, listen, give a moratorium to those companies for at least 3 months, now which is enhanced to about, I think, about August. Now, those which were NPAs or likely to be NPAs because of this COVID will not form under NPAs, but definitely will fall under the NPA. Reason? They do not fall under the category of essential services industries. Now, which are essential industry services? Your pharmaceutical is essential. Your agriculture is essential. Suppose you're auditing or your banking is essential. Suppose you're auditing hotels. Suppose you're auditing restaurants. Suppose you're auditing a jewelry shop. Suppose you're auditing trading company. Suppose you're auditing any of the malls. Suppose you're auditing airline companies. Suppose you're auditing infrastructure or real estate company. Suppose you're auditing mining companies. Suppose you're auditing oil drilling companies. Are these essential? The answer is no. If these were not essential, and you are doing the audit of a bank, and with 3 months of grace, and this 3 months has impacted all of these industries, are you saying then, when you go in September, whichever were not NPAs as of March, suddenly becomes NPAs in the month of September 2020? This brings about the concept of going concern. Did you as a professional, did you as an auditor of a bank look at industry specific and then gave a report? When you're looking at loans classification, when you're looking at deposits, when you're looking at NPAs, did you look at this? Did you look at the securities? Did you look at the market capitalization, decapitalization that has happened during this period? Did you look at the number of jobs that have been lost? Did you look at the number of monies that are not available? Did you look at the number of laborers, migrant laborers who have gone out of this place? If you have not looked at it and issued a long format audit report saying that it's clean, it is deferred, I think you need to start rethinking as to what it is. Number one. Number two, for us, the evidence is what is called as direct confirmation. What is the best evidence? Seeking direct confirmations. The whole couriers have been closed. How did you get confirmations? Did you use an IT? Are you an IT savvy firm which is completely into IT savvy? If the answer is yes, how did you seek confirmations? Did you write? Because right now under the SA 505, it says for external confirmations, you need to get the documents, you need to prepare documents, you need to send from your office under your own supervision should go. Where's the question of supervision? You can't even enter into premises of any bank. You are under complete lockdown. How do you do it? How did you seek confirmations? Now, suppose let's say this year was picked up by the peer reviewer because 2020, 2021, 2022 will come in 2023. How will you explain this? So the peer review say you are non-compliant. No, sir, you understand the situation of COVID. You also went through. You should have done it. This is where what is the audit process that you followed becomes essential. So they're driving the new way of audit brings about the fundamentals of audit itself. The fundamental of preparation of a financial statement is going concern. Did you test going concern? Suppose some client comes back and say, sir, for the 9 months, there's only 9 days, sir, it did not impact our financials. We are fine, we are good. There's no problem, sir. We are making a profit-making company. It does not impact. But then your question should be, sir, you're under lockdown, shutdown for the past 2 months. You're not paying salaries. You're not paying your payables. Your sundry credit debtors are not, your customers are not giving you money back. You're not in ability to raise finance with the bank. How will you manage? The client will come back to you and say, hey, listen, no, that is next year, not this year. We will see next year. Next year anyway, we'll make it up. I think this becomes essential for all of us as professionals to go back and question the fundamental principles of Ind AS 1 or the guidance note issued for preparing a financial statement on a going concern basis as to whether the entity has prepared financials on a going concern basis. And this becomes the most critical factor for all the professions. Cutoff and going concern and impairment, I'll touch upon this. So let me talk about the background. COVID-19 has impacted all. That's the reason it's called pandemic. It is across the whole, whether it is state, city, village, global, India, abroad, everywhere it got impacted. No distinction between boundaries, no distinction between industries. Travel restrictions, quarantine measures, social distancing, everything. Even today, you cannot have people more than 30%. No 100% allowed. Even in some states, you can open only alternate days. Even today, by going by taxi or by two-wheelers is again, you've got challenges. Now, this is a time where for the auditors to look differently. Somebody can come back to you and say, hey, listen, sir, you're too negative in your thinking. Why are you asking this question? So when the things are bad, why you want to go and qualify or modify my report? The same report will be picked up by a regulator and say, you've compromised with the audit with the company and therefore you're non-compliance to auditing standards. This is the biggest challenge that will come through, not in 2020. You may be sympathetic towards the client, but the regulators will not be sympathetic towards you for not complying to the auditing and accounting standard, and that becomes very, very essential. And therefore, there are various guidelines issued by ICAI in respect of COVID environment. You need to comply to all of that. It was issued in March, it was issued in April, it was issued in May. Even as late as last week, subsequent events review guidances have been issued. So you need to look at each of these. The COVID guidance is detailed, talks about fair value, talks about measurement, talks about inventory, talks about how do you validate. Earlier, you could go to the client, look at the client, sit with the client, have a chat with the client, have a tea with the client, do your audit work, do physical verification physically, get external confirmation, communicate with the client in person. You used to do all of these. Now you cannot do. You need to be tech savvy. Today, a lot of audits are getting completed without being going to the client place. You see many of the listed companies who have been issuing audit reports. Many of they've been releasing audit results. How are they doing it? They're releasing all of these because many of the companies have now started moving to what is called as virtual tool, virtual audits. You are connected to workplace. You can sit here and can start doing it. I think this is the new world that you should embrace. And therefore, the new transformation, what COVID has brought in, is to learn new skills, which is your IT skills. And this is very, very important. Now, what are these audit teams? All are remotely connected. Now, look at this. Earlier, we all used to sit in a room and used to talk. Today, all are connected to what is called as an audit data center. You now use experts, now use cybersecurity experts, now you use IT specialists, now you hold every information in a cloud. So if you see yesterday, the Western India CA Institute has released one beautiful document as working from home, and it's about a 64 pages or 65 pages. Please look at it. This is a new audit team. This is a new audit evolution. This is what you need to start embracing. If you have not done before, start doing it now. Audit is no longer around the computers. Auditors now shall use digital technologies, shall use virtual private networks or wide virtual distribution networks, or should get access to the clients. The clients will now start sharing information through emails, start sharing information, or even conduct meetings. For example, today, the virtual meeting happening through YouTube. So you could use YouTube, you could use Zoom, you can use Skype, you could use Microsoft, any of Teams, any of that. Now, earlier, used to sit in a client's place. Today, remote audit is completely different. Everything is hosted under cloud. So there is a third party administrators, there are user A, user B, there is a data owner, and all of these are looked at how it gets uploaded, how it gets downloaded, how is the security image is transferred, how do you do data auditing. All of these becomes essential. Now look at it. One is audit of the financial statements, audit of the document vouchers, audit of the records. The other is audit under the IT environment remotely. Look at what controls. How do you know somebody who has uploaded the document is uploaded a genuine document? Someone who scanned an email to you is actually scanned a right document. These becomes essentials. So therefore, you need to have what is called as a standard operating procedures document, or for the purpose of scanning, who is the maker, who is the checker, who is the preparer, who is the reviewer, who takes the document from which record, who scans it, who authorizes, who sends it to you. All of these controls needs to be documented. This is a very, very critical essential. Getting just email will not solve the issue. Whether that information that is provided to you has this been genuine or not becomes essential. And therefore, as an auditor, when you're doing a remote audit, you need to ensure the accuracy, the completeness, the relevance, and more important, the reliability of the data. Now, suppose the client says, sir, we can upload, we cannot upload. The other way to do it is ask the client to come and deliver to any of your staff of the information that you want to audit. You may not want to send your team because they cannot go to the client. They're in a quarantine zone or a containment zone. So therefore, you might advise your client to go and deliver the record. You can do that. But if that is not possible, if they want the audit report to be issued, make sure you are adequately addressing all of the auditing standards, including if you need to bring a modification or a qualification, please bring it in the audit report. In fact, if the latest report guidance issued by ICAI talks about how do you need to modify in respect of COVID environment, please go through that in detail. Now, auditing under today remote environment, there is no timing. You start morning 9 o'clock, you might end night 10 o'clock, you might continue to work morning 4 o'clock, or you can do at 6 o'clock. So there is no time. So therefore, the flexible schedules becomes, because there is nothing called time you take to travel. Probably today under relaxation, you can still go, but still there is this night curfew between 7 and 7, which prohibits you to go and get that audit done. So make sure, as much as you've got taking safeguards for to be safe, make sure you take adequate safeguards to look at the information that is provided by the client. Make sure they are authentic and reliable so that they are complete for you to carry out the audit. As I said, for scanned document, make sure you have the digital reproduction. Look at the controls management, what controls have been exercised, and how you have maintained the confidentiality. In the earlier periods, before pre-COVID, you always used to have an office boy or somebody office assistant who's going to use to scan it. Now that is not the case. External confirmations, no longer external confirmation. You can send hand mails. Now you have to use online. Make sure that you maintain control of confirmation. Make sure the communication is encrypted. Make sure you don't use your public providers like Google, Yahoo. Suppose you have your own email ID, use your own email ID so that they are secured and it comes directly delivered to you. Please do not get confirmation directly from the client and say, client has opted and therefore use it as confirmations. Get it directly from the client. Inventory. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we have got is how did you do inventory valuation, or how did you do the existence of inventory? How did you verify physical inventories? Now, one of the aspects of it you cannot perform as of 31st March. The minimum thing that you should have had is the cutoff document as of March 31st. You can look at two ways. If the company had already conducted a physical verification where you were involved, let's say prior to March, prior to COVID, you can do what is called as roll forward procedures. If you're not in a position to, you're in a position to now, let's say in the month of May, let's say May 25th or May 26th, do the verification and go back and arrive at March 31st. This is called roll back. That means you're rolling back to the procedures as of 31st of March. Now, let's say there are remote places where you can't go, it's a containment zone. You can use what is called a chartered accountants, a third party who are auditors, where you can, or an internal auditors, people who are involved there, you can take their assistance, ask them to go and verify if they're closer to it. They're not closer, you still have chartered accountants from that area. You can write to them under your guidance, they can go and do a physical verification. Still not possible, you can still do a combination of two. You can do what is called use this video camera, go and get the live locations, identify live locations, send somebody, a representative who's not related to the company, so that person is present and you capture all this information. So either you can do through that route, you can send somebody from your office or somebody from the internal audit, or use a third party chartered accountants, or use some other persons who can help you and facilitate. And this becomes very, very essential. Let's say you're not able to, there are stocks lying with third party. Get third party confirmation directly to you. Now, one of the biggest challenges, you would have seen that many of the companies are under lockdown for more than 2 months. And you would have seen in most of this WhatsApp circulation something from Malaysia, saying some of the malls have got fungus, some of the inventory got spoiled, and all of this. Think through the inventory. If it is perishable, that has got a shelf life, or it's got a shelf life, there will be some damage that would happen, whether it's a steel, whether it is a inventory which is packed for so long, it could have been destroyed by any of the pests or any of the rats, anything which could be there. You do not know the condition of the inventory itself. So therefore, that becomes a significant issue. How do you verify that? You may suddenly open and you find that a lot of things are falling down because 2 months nobody has entered inside that godowns. So therefore, the condition of it. The second aspect of it. You have the inventory, but these inventories may not be of the value. For example, all the auto production, auto companies did not produce even a single unit, did not sell a single unit. Now, the question is, will it be the same price that will carry? Or certain inventories which have got damaged, will you be able to sell the same product? Take the example of a refrigerator or a television which has been put in a godown for a long period, for 2 months, it has not put, or an air condition which is not good. It's settled with dust because nobody has gone, nobody has meant upkept. It is not under air conditioning, it's everything's dust has come. You don't even know the condition of it. So therefore, it becomes essential not only the existence, not only the condition, but also whether you need to write down the value of that inventory, and this becomes very, very essential. The focus on the auditor now should be on provisioning for slow-moving items, obsolete items, and expired stock, and these are very, very, very essential. I've talked to you about the physical verification process. Make sure you have all of these records with you. Whichever way you have followed, whether it's a video call, whether it's an inward document, outside document, outward document, make sure you have a copy of all of these documents. Property, plan, and equipment. You may have questions. Somebody might say, sir, 2 months we have not passed, so we don't want to post depreciation. Now, depreciation standards are very clear. Either the useful life or the obsolescence, or by the time itself, lapse of time. You need to make sure. You need to make sure the existence of the plant and machinery itself. So these are some of the things you need to look at it. Whether the existence, whether a physical verification was carried out within a particular period, you have to look at whether the plant and machinery needs to undergo change. For example, it is a continuous process plant. 2 months, no production has happened. Will there be a higher cost of maintenance? The answer is yes. To restart that process, it takes huge money. Take the case of calamities that has happened in Vizag, of the LG polymers which got burst, where a lot of people had to where a lot of people suffered because of that, or the production came to a standstill, or to rechange the whole of the plant life of the plant liner itself. So these becomes very, very essential. So every entity that you're auditing, every client that you're visiting, the cost of restarting is much, much higher. And therefore, it becomes very, very essential. You need to look at plant and machinery, you need to look at inventory, all of this. And therefore, these becomes very, very essential. Not only this, because you have a typical basis of loading all the overheads onto the inventory. Now, you cannot say, because I've got plant and machinery I've not used, I'm going to load it onto my inventory. No. Loading of overheads on an inventory should be on a normalized basis of production, based on a budget. You cannot be using the actual number of it. So therefore, you also need to look at standardization, all of this, because there could be underutilization of plant and machinery during this period. Cash and bank balances. The most important part is not only the certified balance. Make sure if you have not done before, ask the client to deposit cash in the bank itself on 31st, or make sure they don't have cash. If you have not got, do a rollback procedures. How do you monitor? See, somebody in the bank might say that, or the client might come back and say, I've already got checks on hand, but because the bank was not there, we couldn't deposit the check. So you might have a situation where there are a lot of checks in hand for which you got it from the customers, which you have not deposited. You might have that situations. What are the controls the new controls they've put on online payments? So during the period of lockdown, many of the clients might be working through online. Online payments should have happened. How are you exercising it? How are the online payments happening? What are the new control systems that are put in place? These are some of the things which are very, very essential. These are for large companies which have got acquisitions, which have got goodwill. Now there are no businesses, nothing has happened. There is every likelihood the goodwill that you're carrying in the financial statements will be a matter or a subject matter for impairment. Now, how do you measure this? You measure impairment using the forecasted cash flows, using the cash forecast. You cannot be using a measurement saying that, hey, listen, I've got land, I've got buildings, I will use asset basis, and therefore my assets are not impaired, therefore the goodwill is not impaired. Goodwill is always a subjective of impairment using a forecast. A forecast is a cash forecast. That means if you were to generate business and profit and cash in the future, arrive using the future cash value of that to the current period, compare between the carrying value. And COVID-19 has got significant impact. The biggest impact is force majeure conditions. What is a force majeure condition? Suppose you have got a contract for, let's say, 3 years. Now the customer comes back and says, listen, I am under lockdown, I don't have money, so therefore I want to exercise force majeure clause. He says, I don't want a commitment for this today, I want to cancel this contract because I will not be able to honor it. It could be a contract of goods, it could be a lease building. You could have taken a lease building for 5 years. Now today you suddenly find that work from home, 30% people can work, I don't need buildings, I don't want to pay rent. So you go back to the landlord and say, I'm exercising force majeure conditions and therefore I want to cancel. For the landlord, for the company, there's a cash loss. Now, when you do a cash forecasting, which was not there before, you would have said in rental income, you would have said revenue from customers, which has been there. Now, because of COVID, all of these gets reduced. Will this have an impact on the goodwill? The answer is yes. And therefore, goodwill becomes an essential. Not only goodwill, going concern also. Because as much as you're going and canceling, you say, I'm taking out people, 20% of the people will be taken out, or 40% of the senior management will have to forego salaries. Why? Because they don't have cash. Are these indicators of impairment? Are these indicators of going concern issue? The answer is yes. The moment these are indicators of going concern, automatically impairment of goodwill happens. If there's impairment of goodwill happens, automatically going concern happens. And therefore, it becomes essential that when you are testing going concern, where there is a shortfall, it automatically impacts the goodwill also. Look at revenue, expense, and other areas. You need to have three-way of matching. That means right from the time of bills raised, goods received, and payment cycle, have the three-way of matching. Look at during this lockdown period, how are you recognizing it? Are there been cancellation of contracts? How are they recognizing revenue? Are they recognizing bill and hold sales? Are they saying that, we had the stocks, actually the customer wanted us to maintain? Now you'll find significantly more and more people will start having bill and hold sales. Test the revenue, test the expenses, test the sales in transit, test the inventory in transit. These are very, very essential. How do you obtain audit evidence when you're auditing remotely? You can use what is called an email or a secure network. Use a VPN, use a virtual private network, make sure it is secured. Use a cloud-based, which is secured, so that you have the firewalls, everything is done. Fraud risk, the biggest challenge that you will have is fraud risk, because to meet an objective of working capital, the companies want to show more of inventory. The companies want to show that current assets are recoverable. They may want to undershow the payables, the liabilities. They might say, we have got negotiation with the creditors, and therefore we are not going to pay. So you'll have a lot of pressures. Look at the fraud drivers, and COVID environment is no bigger environment. So this is a great opportunity for the auditors to look at if there are any weaknesses in the control. Going concern, I understand you have a session this Saturday. I'm not going to get into more details, but it's very important. Like if you look at CARO 2020, which has now been deferred to 2021, one of the significant asks is whether the current assets are sufficient to pay the current liabilities, whether the operating ratios are sufficient, whether the debt equity ratio is strengthened. So look at all of these when you're looking at it. Look at the budgets, look at whether the company has got orders, but look at whether the companies quickly started producing whether the company is still operating 20%, 30%, 50%. These are all indicators of a going concern. And a going concern is very critical because from the year 2018, in the audit report, you need to comment on material uncertainty. And this material uncertainty is very essential in a COVID environment, and therefore you need to look at much more closely. What are the benefits? Definitely, because you are using less of physical documents, data is stored in a very tiny, you're using digital audit technologies, where data are very stored in a very small chips. You don't have to maintain physical records, you can maintain in um, clouds. You can easily download, upload all of these information. You can use your artificial intelligence because you can use various tools. You can use analytical tools, all of these which will help you in carrying out the audit. Saves time. It really avoids traveling because of this pandemic. You will have social distancing issues. You have all of this. It avoids all of these. It's more efficient, but it's also got challenges because first of all, you need to trust the client. First, you need to see what is the documents that they are providing. You need to see the environment is clear. It does not have any cyber attack. There is no training, for example, for many of the chartered accountants under to do an audit under IT. So please take the assistance of those people who have got knowledge under IT environment. That really helps. In conclusion, very important, your success depends upon how secure you have access to the data. What is your bandwidth? Please don't use free bandwidths. Those bandwidths which are available for free, please don't use it. There are always cyber attacks. You should be literate. Use communications which are more safer. Even Zoom is not safer. It's been questioned by the Supreme Court of India. Use analytical and forensic tool. Now the thinking moves from an audit to a forensic. Start questioning everybody. Future of audit. This is going to be the new wave of audit. Embrace technology. With or without COVID, you have to be the change. You need to attract, you need to embrace technology. You need to understand what is Internet of Things. You need to understand what is balance ledgers. You need to understand what are the new ways of audits can be performed. So these are some of the things which you need to start looking at it. As in conclusions, you must be the change that you wish to see in the world. COVID or pandemic is the best example of where change is brought in. It has brought in one thing to all of us is what is human, the definition of human life. What are we as human? We are very, very brittle. We don't have anything. Don't think you are strong. You can't display your Audify. You can't display your best gadgets. You can't go everywhere. You have bank balances. You can't go and spend. You got bank balance. You can't go to the restaurant. You got bank balance. You can't fly airline. You got bank balance. You can't go and meet somebody. You got bank balance. You can't visit to tourist destinations. You are confined at a particular place. And if you want to see the change in you, bring the change in audit, think through differently, and make yourself a much more literate under the new environment. COVID or no COVID, embrace technology. This is what I have for the under the new audit, the new challenges or driving the change during the new audit basis. If there are any questions, I'll hand over to the chairman. I'm more than happy to answer any of the questions.
In case if the client in a remote area invites the statutory auditor to participate in the physical verification of stocks on 30th May from Delhi, it seems it's difficult.
Correct. So this is one of the biggest challenges which many firms will be facing. So what you should do is ask the client whether there are internal auditors or any other external auditors who are involved in that plant. If they are involved, then you have a communication with that internal audit, with the internal auditor, send instruction directly to the internal auditor, get the complete inventory list to yourself, identify the sample, share the sample with the internal auditor, let the internal auditor check, verify, and send the report to you. Based on that report, you can carry on. Please see the ICAI guidelines, which is on inventory, especially in relation to the use of third party. You need to evaluate his capability and all of this. He should not be involved. He should not be connected to the client. He should independently carry out on your behalf and give you a report. That is allowed by the ICAI. Please use that difference and use that assistance and all.
Yes, a continuation to that question only. The person is asking no other auditor is involved.
If no other auditor is involved, you are not able to establish doing a physical verification. You cannot carry out, and the amount of the inventory is significant. Please modify your auditor's report that you're not in a position to carry out of the inventories because of these reasons.
Okay, very
That's the
beautifully.
reason I said report.
Okay, very beautifully answered, sir. The next question is from Raj Arora ji. What about AS2 in case of inventory?
So there are two things which are things. When I understand if you say the AS2 is nothing but the valuation of inventory that you're talking about. We talked about existence. We are talking about valuation.
Yeah,
Cost or NRV, whichever is lower. When you're not in a position to verify the existence multiplied by the rate is what the value is. So when you're not valued, in any case you're not able to verify, you'll have to modify the report. But
yeah,
look at third party information, look at market information, look at market intelligence, look at all of these informations. Those informations, if it is available, if this, let's say that some of the their own customers comes back and say, I want to return the inventory that I've taken in the month of January because I'm not able to sell, right?
yeah,
Then look at whether you need to make more provision. This is the time when the cost or net realizable value, whichever is lower, becomes essential. So you might have a situation where your inventory is further written down because market information you don't have, because you're not able to sell the product, you're not able to produce the product, your products are sitting there, the customer is not in a position to sell because there is no market for him. Today, just see, if I ask you, say, go and buy an air conditioner, and or if I say go and buy something from a mall, some beautiful dress, or you go and just wait for your existence or live for your existence, what will you choose? You choose the live for
existence.
existence, because these are
Yeah,
all not required. These are all anyway. May chala gaya, boss. April gaya, May gaya, agla saal dekhenge. I think you get, this is a new way of life you get used to. So therefore, that's the reason I'm saying it is every industry that you deal. Look at whether it's in lockdown, and if the inventory is damaged, please make sure you make provisions. Insist on these provisions to be done.
so the person is saying we should refuse the participation.
No, if you're an auditor and you're not in a position to carry out, you have to choose to. You can deal in your report, right? Why should
Yeah,
you refuse?
yeah, report.
You should choose, and only that basis you can. Suppose you're not in a position, you've got a report to deal with. Don't
Yeah,
refuse, because refusal is not a basis, because the client might say, I have given him a car, I've given everything with all the safety measures, I've given everything is taken care, but the auditor said he can't come back. Auditor
yeah,
should have chosen the various information that is available. Third party, existence. Did he ask all of these questions? If he has asked all of these questions, then if all of these questions are not answered, there's no internal auditor, there's no chartered accountant, there's no third party, there is, all of these are not available. Because you're in a containment zone, you are not, cannot go. You've got conditions which prohibits you to go. Therefore, you can't. Can you rely on management certificate? The answer is no. If you rely on management certificate, why do you need to audit a financial statement? And especially in pandemic, you need to audit more. That is the reason the professional skepticism now is much higher.
then
Hard
normal.
talking is much higher now than what was there before.
Yeah. Sir, so I guess Rupali Gupta ji, the question has been answered that we should not rely on the management certificates because sir have also already answered that question.
See,
So
management certificate, even in management certificate, if you look at it, right,
Yeah,
it says it is not a replacement
yeah,
of the responsibilities of an auditor to carry out an audit procedure. Management certificate is only making sure they oblige the statement that they make management responsibilities in preparation of financial statements. If you see in your audit report, you have got management responsibility in preparation of audit report. From where do you derive? You derive from the certificate, that representations that they give you, saying that we have made sure the fixed assets existence, we have valued the fixed assets, the plant is operational, we have not laid off people, there are no changes in suppliers contract, there are no changes in rental contract, there is no changes in the wages, there's all the receivables that are receivable are due and receivable are good and receivable, there is no provision for doubtful debts. Your assets, deferred tax assets, because we have profitable entities, so they will recover deferred tax assets. If you only say this, that is how you include that as a part of your management responsibility statement.
Yeah. Very amazingly answered, sir.
So, thank you very much for such a wonderful presentation on peer review and the new way of driving the audit in this COVID environment. And I hope this time we will do the audits in a very different way as
Yes.
guided by Ganesh sir. So let's hope for the best and let's see this new experience very soon. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching this video. Thanks a lot, Ganesh sir. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Stay
Thank you, sir.
safe. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.